All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wednesday, week 13, GamesCrafters. Woo! Great to see everybody. Let me introduce Alek Erickson. Alek found me online. We should talk about how you actually found me, but found the GamesCrafters group. We had a conversation. He's a game developer, so he's a postdoc working at Karolinska Institute, if I get that right, Institutet, in Sweden. And he's a game person. He's a game designer. And so he said, I made this new game. What do you think about it? And I said, that's really interesting. Let me share this with my group. And so I actually coded some stuff up in the background, and we ended up having a back and forth a fair bit. And at some point we said, you got to introduce it. His game was called Trike. He said, let's at least have you meet my team and talk about the work that you're doing and talk about the work that we're doing and see if there's any possible collaborative opportunities or just ideas for new games that maybe the next year's group could take on and try to code that up. So I wanted to, again, introduce you, Alek, maybe spend a little time talking about how you got into games, what you do now, maybe talk about the games you invented, and maybe our group leads possibly can introduce themselves as well. Welcome, Alek.
Right. I mean, okay, so I have I prepared like a presentation.
Yeah, go. Love it. Yeah. Do it. Yeah, please. I'll spotlight you. I'll spotlight you if you want. Go ahead.
How does that work? So,
yeah, I got it. I'm all set. I got it. It's all Zoom magic.
So I do a screen share?
Yes, you click on share screen, the green button at the bottom with the arrow, and then I set it so that anybody can screen share if they want to, and then you can share what you got. This is great.
All right. Yeah, so I mean, basically I got into game design as a child, but I found this community on Board Game Geek in around 2017, and when I started redeveloping one of the earlier abstracts that I was working on, like as a kid, basically, and I went through a bunch of basically really crappy designs before I discovered what it is that I love about abstracts and what I think is so special about combinatorial games. So I just want to mention that, like, you made it seem that like this is my career or something. This is not.
Yeah, I didn't mean to.
I work at Karolinska, but it's more I'm doing like biology, developmental biology, and what I'm doing with games is it's all just like a passion project. So
that's what I do too, by the way. Just I get paid for something else. I get paid to teach computer science, and this is a passion project.
That's what I figured.
To use this as a fertile place for people to learn software engineering and team design and and research. And
right. I think it's a really cool niche community. I just want to so I have a couple things to speak about. Just like once, I can probably just quickly go through the beginning stuff because I didn't know how much people were into abstracts. It seems like you guys are doing a lot of different stuff, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And then talk about what I've done with Trike, because it's this game where I just keep learning more and more, and like use it as a way to learn about games. So that's kind of the pitch that I want to do. And then I just wanted to briefly say a few words about some other projects, because each game comes with its own potential computer or programming challenge. So if we just I think you guys all, I guess, know what abstract games are. So I just took this from Nick Bentley's blog, but the thing that they all share.
I don't know Nick Bentley, by the way, so I need to now know who Nick Bentley is. Is he a very
he's like a modern game designer?
Okay,
and he's he has a really great blog on abstracts. And I mean, to me, like all these, there's all sorts of kind of rules about what they are, but really the most important thing is that they're this kind of easy to learn but impossible to master. So this having emergent deep gameplay with a few interactions between pieces, and then all of a sudden strategies and tactics emerge from basically nothing. And of course, important is that there's no luck or hidden information, so that when you win or you lose, you can actually learn a lot about why, and so you can always be improving.
And from our point of view, by the way, the reason we like him, the reason I like them, is that if you solve them, if you strongly solve them, you have the answer for all eternity. It's not like, well, you have an AI that plays pretty well, but if the other guy draws double sixes, no, I will always win, or always, can lose if I want to like let a kid win first or something. I could always lose or always win depending on how I go first or second. So that's what's nice about this, is that once you know the answer, it's the answer for all eternity.
Right.
Which some people, by the way, think is like equivalent to clearing all the trees of the Amazon. like once you do that, you take away all the mystery and all the beauty and joy of it, because the beauty and joy is the mystery, is discovering the emergent key. And once you've discovered it, you've kind of revealed it. You know, the cold hard hand of a computer has revealed it. But I think there's still juice there. I mean, we solved Connect 4 and it's still fun to play. So we didn't like we killed the kill, you know.
Right. Connect 4 is solved. And also Checkers is solved. It's a draw. And that was a paper that came out in Science, and like, and people still play checkers, of course.
Right.
But like, and I'll just take this opportunity to say that like, basically all of the classics, you know, they're there because the rules were just like perfect to incubate with humans for so many thousand years, or maybe 100 years, so that there's enough people thinking about it, so that we have enough strategy and tactics built up, so that there is this long skill chains. Although some skill chains are longer than others. So this is the thing. Like a game, I don't know if you see my mouse, right?
Yeah.
So it's a game like Go, which has been played for over 3,000 years, you guys know about ELO rating systems. Like in chess, you know, if you're like a 1600 player, or you have like a 75% chance of beating a 1500 player, something like that, or even more.
That's right. That's my understanding of it too.
Right. So these long skill ladders is what some people, I guess, might say is what makes a game
rich.
Deep.
Yeah, rich.
Yeah,
indeed,
rich.
yeah.
And you want so I'll just go into it. Like, I actually don't want to talk about this right now, but this is just like some things that make a game fun. But we can just like kind of turn that into this, which is what most people are talking about when they're talking about the qualities of a good abstract. It's like the depth that gives you like this really the rich different levels of play, and also can reach high levels of play, so that you can have that you can always study this game your whole life, and you can have a community of people dedicated to studying the game for many lifetimes, and still not reach the peak of human excellence. But then also, like, beginners should be able to pick up the game. They should be able to be easy to learn, and beginners should be able to like think about at their beginner level or their intermediate levels, like, what is a good move, what is a bad move, are they winning, are they losing? So they have to have some idea about what's going on, and that's what makes a game like able to have clarity. And so, I mean, games where you're just like looking at the board and they're just like, what's going, and where anybody's just like, what's going on here? Obviously, then there's something wrong. And of course, so depth is kind of, this depth is somewhat at odds with clarity, because depth is these mysteries that you can always uncover with further practice, but clarity is like this thing that you do know, that you can say, okay, there's something here. And then there's two things that also the game designers are on this forum that I just talked about, this Board Game Geek abstract general forum that I was just talking about. That's like how I got into game design. They always talk about drama and decisiveness, because they love this guy's essay about this stuff. And so drama is basically just that, like, if you're losing, you should be able to win. But it's also at odds with decisiveness, because it should be at a certain point that the winning player should just win, you know, and that it should not go on forever and lead to a draw or some forced cycle where people just like are going around and around and never ending the game. Like, it should be able to be decisive. So if you're the better player, you should win. Or if you know more, if you figured out this position, if you looked deeper, you know the strategy, then you should win. So this is the thing that is also at odds with drama, because also you want it to be exciting, and you don't want it to just be like, oh, the first player is always just going to win. So so there's all these problems that come up with game design, and you know, like.
But it is the case, by the way, from the point of view of just a perfect computer that can see the entire thing, it is the case that in theory the first player could always win. Or
exactly.
So there's a little bit of like, you can't get around that, which is
right. No, of course not. So of course the game tree is the game.
Yeah.
And there's always this tension between the unrevealed aspects of the game tree and
what
just
humans understand it or something.
The game combinatorial value.
Yeah.
So
what I like about drama, by the way, if I can add a little comment, is what I appreciate about drama is it says the human understanding of what makes a good or bad position isn't correct, isn't complete. For example, a great, what's it called? The Evergreen game. There's this beautiful chess thing where the person was down like so many pieces and kept giving up a queen and then a rook and then ends up winning. Like, wait, you can't give up a queen and 2 rooks and still win, but yes, you can if you pin them in the right, beautiful way. So it's like, well, if I just think about property and how many points ahead I am, there's no way that person should win, but yes, they do because of tempo and because of other things. So it's where the heuristic, the human understanding of what makes a game important isn't at odds with actually what the case, which is there is a path to victory for the person who's behind by a lot.
Right, and sometimes these low to mid branches on a heuristic tree are going to be like completely opposite of what players playing at a master level will be thinking about. Like maybe knight on the rim is grim, but in certain situations in a chess game, you need to put the knight on the rim.
Oh, nice! I had another phrase. I'll use that for my son. I try to teach him chess. That's great. Knight on the rim is grim. That's wonderful.
Right. So
and actually, this is a fun thing that our system could do. If you had a system, well, if we only had a system that would exhaustively search the game and have the strong solution, you could look for ones. You could put in the heuristic. You could use the tree and search for ones in which show me the one that, from the point of view of the static evaluator, it looks like the worst possible, but there's still a win there. Like that would be fun, and you could actually search for those things. You could search for these evergreen paths to that, which is really, really interesting.
Right. Like having different levels, having their evaluation of a position, and if you are able to have the perfect play versus some kind of fuzzy player that all right, so and so then of course the goal is to make a deep game, and we want to make a deep, dramatic, decisive, but also clear game. And so, a lot of game designers start thinking about these kind of mathematical properties. And I just took this from Wikipedia. I know, I'm sorry, but like it is a very good resource for this particular graph, because just this chart just shows you, or this table this shows you all of the some of these properties of very standard abstracts. So, for instance, people talk about the how long the game takes, because if the game is over super quickly or it takes forever, then that's kind of a problem. Or the branching factor, like if there are so few possibilities versus so large a number of possibilities, and ultimately, like some game designers love to kind of tout the game complexity, the game tree complexity. Like there's like, oh, my game is so complex, like because Go, the queen of all abstract games, is so much more complex than chess, and chess is so much more complex than checkers, and it's like you never you don't want it to really be the case that just increasing the board size or like increasing the complexity of a game will lead to a deeper game. You don't want it to be like that, but for any given rule set, if you make a modification that increases the complexity, then I mean you'll get it probably a deeper game. But there is like this one counterexample game that I just want to point out, where basically you can have a super high state space complexity, game tree complexity, average game length, board size, everything, and have a super simple game. It's called Fill the Board, and it's like a square board, and then the last person to place a stone loses, and no matter how big you make the board, how complex you make the game tree, it'll still be equally shallow and totally undramatic, because you exactly know who's going to win.
Right. So actually, it'd be fun to go back to that last thing, to look at the game that has the best complexity per square size. I mean, you could take Othello and make it 20 by 20 Othello, and it's wonderfully interesting. But like, is Othello interesting in 4x4? What games are interesting on 4x4, 3x3, 5x5? Like that's the space that we can actually get to, and so that's where I care about. I want to find out games that are within the space I can actually exhaustively search. Which ones are still interesting, and that's, to me, that's really a fun question to ask.
We're gonna get there because I'm actually I started making this presentation, and then I wanted to go into all the cool stuff that some colleagues of mine in this community are doing. So,
oh wow.
So for instance, like, okay, this is a chart that I made, so I just wanted to take these like properties of the game, and I wanted to study the game depth as a function of game intrinsic values. But like, I want to say, okay, a game is. So say you have an online community where they're playing these games like Go, chess, shogi, hex, whatever, Amazon's, Breakthrough, Connect Four, Hitman, Catch Up. This is Little Golem, and basically there's like thousands of games played here, and then there's a community of these players, right? And so they end up with these peak ratings. So like, there's some some games they have like higher peak ratings. So sometimes humans have reached a higher level of mastery of this game than other games have. If that makes any sense. Like, for instance, the top elo on Othello was 2,500 or 2,600, and in Tsar the top elo was 2,300. Now, obviously, if you play more games, then you'll have the chance to reach a higher elo. So we have to normalize for the games played. So that's what I did here, is take both the websites IGG Game Center and Little Golem, and then just like do a regression where I find like, and so then we find games that basically underperform or overperform according to if the only assumption was that that the only that we would be able to identify game intrinsic depth. So like, obviously this is totally a kind of a how to put it, like controversial view, but like but just humor me for a moment and think about the idea that like a game like Slither and Othello, they constantly have a higher peak rating than what they would be expected just based on the number of games played, whereas a game like Amazon's and Connect 6 are always underperforming it. So
interesting.
Okay, so like, this is like, it's a bit of so we got into a huge argument on week about validity of any of this, and a lot of people are saying like, well, sometimes the game community just hasn't developed enough yet so that they really can they can actually, that the elo can be reached, that they can't even, that it's all this undiscovered depth. So,
I mean, look how many years old Go is, 2000 compared to Slither for 10. So it's just not enough game. That's not enough overall understanding. And by the way, for people to understand, remember, elo is like how many tiers of understanding, how many layers, how deep is this game in some sense of, not the game tree, but in terms of understands of levels of 75% of the games are beaten for one class to the other. That's what that is.
Right. I also wanted to, I also really wanted to normalize for the years that the game has existed, but I didn't put that in there. But certain things like checkers. Well, okay, I'm not gonna trash on checkers. So what was
you should at least, by the way, at the very least, on your graph, if you do this presentation again, have them labeled the game, so I don't have to look up 2300 to know which one it is. Like, let me see which one is which. I know what that is.
I'll do that. so then a guy on, so Stephen Tavener actually decided to say, so you know what, like, all this is just like armchair philosophy, but what I can do is I can take a UCT skill chain. So like, I think it's like a kind of a Monte Carlo tree search. If you just tree search, it will eventually converge on perfect play, given enough computing power or time. And so the algorithm is just like, you take a random one and a slightly stronger like one that can just iterate for a little bit, and then you loop this thing where you play weak versus strong. If strong beats weak, then you set the weak to strong, and then you just keep on increasing the strength of strong, and then eventually once but you can only do this if it beats it by more than whatever 60%, and with a 95% confidence interval, of course. And then once it gets to a certain level of competence where both players are like have discovered the game combinatorial, like the game theoretic value, then it'll just be 50-50 at the end, and it'll never progress anymore. So then you will have figured out how many levels of play exist in this system. So then they compared all these games.
Wow.
And what happened was that, like, well, I mean, you can just plot all the different games with the number of the ln of the UCT iterations. So how many, like, how many iterations it takes to reach the skill level, and how many skill levels they get. This is all 3x3 games, and these are a little bit slightly larger games. And you can also see, for instance, that like just putting the swap rule in hex. I'll talk a little bit about hex more later, but the idea of swap rule, also called the pie rule, the you cut I choose. Person places something, and then the other person gets to choose whether they want to be the first player or just make a regular move. So yeah, how the effect of swap on depth, for instance, is like all alone for skill levels, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
Yeah. And as a function of board size, and so yeah. And also you can, and he also used this to show how the computer converges. So maybe you guys have already been doing stuff like this.
We haven't actually. We do mostly exhaustive search, so we don't do kind of a strong AI getting smarter and smarter, and machine learning kind of model for the most part.
These are not machine learning. This is just manually setting the search time, the iterations that it's allowed to do, up incrementally to as it, and then so then as it gets more time, it converges on perfect play on these tiny games. So yeah,
I don't know if I know Hexapon. The group knows a chi. They might not know hex. We haven't talked about it a lot, but we don't know Hexapon. Can you remind us what Hexapon looks like?
I don't know Hexapon.
Oh, okay. It's not your deck.
I know Breakthrough,
Yeah,
but I don't really want to focus too much on these games. You guys can look them up, because the point is more about the technique rather than. And I will talk about hex later.
Okay.
So I want to talk about Trike now. Trike is like this baby of mine now, and it's I've been working on it all year. Actually, I just made it last year. So and it's actually competing for the best combinatorial game of the year of 2020. So
wow, congratulations! That's amazing.
No, I mean, it's not like a big deal. It's just on this board game forum. So.
Still a big deal for me. That's a great job. Congratulations for that.
So I'll just explain the rules. And so here's what it is. You guys have, it's pretty simple to play. You have a equilateral triangular grid, which is tessellated with hexagons, as you see here. And you have this neutral pawn, which basically can move along its lines of sight. So anyway, these take turns moving this neutral pawn around the board. And so what the pawn does is it can move, like I said, around lines of sight, meaning it can move any number of empty points in a straight line. So straight lines meaning like any of the 6 cardinal directions on this hexagonal grid. But it just can't move onto or jump over occupied points. So like existing stones blocks it. And so then when you move the piece, when you move the pawn, you put your own stone like on the destination point first, and then you put the pawn on top. So white's moving, now black's moving, now white's moving. So they put the stone down or the checker down, and then they put the pawn on top of it. So that's the game, because when the pawn gets trapped, the game is over. And then whenever you have when you're scoring the game, it's basically whoever has more points, like around whoever has more checkers around the pawn wins. So for instance, black just won because black had 3 pieces around the pawn, and white just had 2 around the pawn in the final position. I'll show you scoring later, and then there's this balancing mechanism where at the very first turn of the game, what you can do is you put the pawn, like the first player just puts the pawn down, and then the second player has the one-time chance to either switch sides or just move normally. So this is like the balancing mechanism. and we'll talk about balance as well.
And by the way, this because you have what do we call these? Berkeley Camp call these integer stops, meaning when you're all done. When you're all done with this game, you have a number. Rather than just win or lose, a binary sense, you could have a score. And because of that, it's purely combinatorial. Now you could actually play this in combination with NIM, in combination with Amazons, and figure out, well, that move, I can get a possible victory where I'm up by 10. So this can, you end up having surreal numbers for your values rather than just win or lose or tie. We talked a little bit about that with our group, but not.
Okay, because I don't understand what you mean by that. So I mean, there's a score, yes, but the score is very limited in the different types of scores. And basically, I have designed this. So first of all, there's no ties. That's one thing to note, because it's on a well. I'll
could there not be a tie? Aren't there 6 around you? There's 6 neighbors.
In the scoring, it counts the pawn, the checker that's underneath the pawn.
Ah, very good. Okay, sorry.
So basically, I'll show you like here. Like so, there's 3 types of scoring situations. There's pawn ends up in the corner, and it's like 2 versus 1, or could be 3 to 0. But anyway, it's always an odd number. So on the side, then you have 3 or 2, like in this case, if white had 3 points, black had 2 points, and you have 5 total. And then if it ends up at the center, then it's 4 versus 3, and then you have 7 points total competing for this pawn. So no matter what, it'll be an odd number. One person will always have more than another, and there's no other like possible scenario but you still can do this kind of scoring thing. I just didn't think about that before. And like I was coming up. I actually had the first idea to put it on a hex board. So a hexagonal grid of plated hexagons. But then I thought, but draws would be possible. So I switched it to this one. Also thought that on a square topology, draws are possible. So I figured I don't like that. It's just aesthetically not cool for me.
We have a subtle vocabulary difference. We think of draws as infinite play and ties as where your game is over, finite play, but it's equal power. So I just words, but it's okay. Just we have a little different thing.
And I guess I went through a couple of different iterations of what I would like to do. For instance, maybe it doesn't matter so much, but I'll just quickly say it. Like, so I had this idea that if the pawn got trapped, instead of ending the game, you could also just pick it up and put it somewhere else. But then you know what? That's just a pointless extra rule. So let's just keep this simple. And then also what that does is that allows you to have early game knockouts in this game, because you can basically get trapped right away if you're not paying attention. So
I prefer that. You know, Nyman's Morris has a flying rule at the end, which I like in that game, but I think it's cleaner here not to have it here, because I worked you into the corner for only for you to be able to jump to a place. Now I'm stuck. Like, this doesn't feel like right.
Right. And of course, I tried a last to move wins as a default, but then I realized that would make it impartial. So that was no good. And then I also tried this idea of like the biggest possible triangle to form with your stones, but then it was just like, that's so weird and like difficult to score. So like the way it is now, it's.
By the way, why didn't you like impartial? I mean, there are many games that are out there in the space of games that are impartial. People play. What is it about impartial games you don't like so much?
For me, I don't like the idea that everything in a strategy will just come down to parity, like move order, and that's what happens in impartial games.
Right. I mean, because what's nice about this is that you could look like you're behind the whole time because you've got all your ones, but then you make one move and save it, and now you're surrounded by your own. So like that whole idea of kind of drama wouldn't really exist in an impartial game, because one move one way or the other, the game is over because of parity. But because here you have so there is something to say that you have very little drama in impartial games typically. Because every move you could lose the game. That's how impartial game. You can't ever impartial games mean you can't ever bank I bank some points and I'm using that. Oh, all of a sudden you spoiled my bank and you spilled my bank onto the ground or something. So you don't have that in impartial games. Every move is a win or lose kind of situation. Here you could bank it where anything you do, I'm going to win. But all of a sudden, there's a way to come out of that and sneak it back where it looks like I'm going to win because I got all these blacks. I imagine all these browns in a whole cave, but there's a way out of the cave that I didn't see or something interesting like that.
Right. That's actually that's the hypothesis I had when I was first thinking about this, and we'll get into that. I'll get into the sharpness.
Nice.
So I also ran UCT skill chain for Trike, and there's basically, this is a size 5. I want to run higher board sizes too, but basically we reach about 13 skill levels. So it's about the same as Hex, which is on a 4x4, which is about the same number of cells. So I think it's pretty comparable. And so one huge question that I had when I first designed the game was, does the pi rule work to balance the game? Because if all the first moves are winning, then obviously it's not even a balancing mechanism. So the idea of if you play here, then player 2 should be able to switch sides and then the game begins, so player 1 puts the pawn anywhere with a checker underneath it. Player 2 has a one-time chance to swap sides or make a regular move. So then alternatively, black could just, play somewhere instead along these lines of side. So requires that at least some first move should be losing. So is that a thing? And so I reached out to this guy. Actually, he can't reach out to me. He said, I'll help you with this. And he made a Python solver, which you can find on the GitHub. And this is really cool. So this helped me. I solved size 4 by hand, and I was solving size 5 by hand when he came into the picture. And we figured out that so all the question marks are losing first moves, and all the exclamation part are winning first moves. And it was really crazy to find out that okay, first of all, at least most of the board sizes we have losing first moves. Size 6 is apparently, the pi rule doesn't really matter on this one, because no matter where you go, you're still winning as player 1. So it would always be suitable to swap. There's all sorts of things to talk about here, but we could only speculate on bigger sizes. And the thing is, it took a millisecond to solve this. It took 30 seconds to solve this. It took 2 minutes to solve this, and then all of a sudden it took days to solve size 7. So yeah, I'm not going to go further than that, but at least I know. And we got some swap maps for using other programs like Monte Carlo based programs. So the answer is yes.
What's a swap map? Sorry.
A swap map is this basically.
Oh, I see.
To show the game theoretic value of every first move. And so yeah, the game is balanced by the pi rule, which is amazing, and probably on bigger boards definitely as well. And it looks like this is a winning move no matter where. And the computers love this first move. Why do they love this first move? They will always swap because it creates a trap. So now there's this place here. If the pawn ends up here, then it's a win for black no matter what. That's the idea. Because the second to last move would always be this one. Right. So then we use this solver and say okay, let's look at some basic parameters. What's the branching factor like? So we can kind of take the solver and we can look at entire game trees of Trike, the entire game tree. Because what he did was he didn't just solve the game, he just printed out the entire game tree as well and printed out stats on it. So we could look at the branching factor as a function of depth, and we can see this. This is just me trying to create a deployment graph. So idea of branching factor as a function of depth on sample games that I've actually just played in real life. And I like Trike because it has these forced sequences where you have to play it. The pawn goes into these little corridors, and then you have to play certain things for a while. But then there's other parts where it comes out, and then it has open space again, and you have choices again. It's kind of like the forcing sequences in checkers or forced captures, or when you're in check in chess. There's these things where they have predictable outcomes that allow players to read ahead. And so when you have the branching factor and you have the number of moves, and you have the entire game tree, you can start to calculate the game tree complexity on various board sizes. So these were from the solver, and then these were from real games that he played by just calculating the complexity by multiplying branching factors at every depth for the whole game. And so that's what we get. This is like on size 13, it's like about the size of draughts. So about the size of about checkers, which to me is super nice. And then this is just like a picture of what the game tree looks like in his solver. And so what I want to do, as for the class, I want you guys to like take this and like draw these lines so that you can really and re-visualize it as like an actual, I don't know, like maybe like an evolutionary tree where they have these like circular plots where they really show branches that are winning for this or that player, and you can see entire branches that are restricted to one, or branches where that no matter what you do, you're always going to lose, or and kind of try to learn more about the structure of the game tree by revisualizing it somehow. This is the sharpness that we were talking about. Basically, I plotted the function, the number of winning moves, or I plotted the fraction of positions that were won by the first player after a certain depth of the game. So what the crazy thing is that like after the first player moves on these small sizes, almost always it goes down to a loss for player one, and then after the second player moves, it goes back up to a win on average, and then after the first player moves again, it goes back down to a loss. So what's happening is on average, almost all moves are losing. So the players have a chance to win, but on average they'll lose because there's so many ways to lose. It's such a sharp game that that most games are lost for the person who just moved. But that as the time goes on, these kind of balance out, especially in the larger size games, and you see that the oscillations remain around even, and they get dampened, and they approach 50%, 50-50, where it's even for both players. So this is a kind of idea that the game is not only balanced but sharp. Then this guy, oh my God, he started creating puzzles for all trike positions that have been with 6 pieces per player on the Trike 7 board. So he started studying and he started solving from this set of positions, which there are 258,000 of them. And he solved half of those, and he found that there's like always at least almost always at least one winning move, and yeah, just so much. But the idea is that this, so actually there's going to be a book, I think, of endgame puzzles for Trike.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And so then I programmed it in Ludai. I want you guys to know about Ludai. I
don't know about it. Wow.
It's a general game playing system where it has its own computer programming language. So for instance, I programmed Trike in Ludai, and it looks like this. So define the neighbors, count the sites and the intersections of the sites around the occupied by player 2 and player 1. And this game, these 2 players, equipment is this hex board on the triangle shape, and there's balls for each. And then you have the pie rule, the swap rule, and then you will add to empty sites. But then this is the opening. The pie rule, you add 1 to an empty site. But then like after this phase, you go to the real play where you add to the sites within the line of sites that are empty. But then if it's it's so natural language programming that you can really put in any game that you can kind of think of as an abstract. And so then we started learning about how the computer likes to play Trike, and it's all about setting traps, increasing the value of your own traps, eliminating enemy traps, by partitioning the board into a thing where, you know, all the enemy traps are like on the other side and the pawns on this side, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's actually kind of fun. Like, here's one position. The computer's really thinking about this as white, because black just played here, white will play here, and then white will have two traps here and here. And so no matter which one black diffuses, white will be left with another kind of live trap. So this is the idea. Yeah. So I don't know if I have any time left but maybe
we got 10 minutes. Go ahead. Sure.
So we talked about hex a little bit. So hex is like the simplest modern abstract, and it's just like, if you connect the opposing sides with your color, then you win. So that's basically it. And so there's been all these people like so
white wants to connect left to right and black wants to connect top to bottom, just to FYI.
Right. And so there have been all these people trying to make square hex. They're like, well, diamonds are weird, we have chessboards. And so like the idea is like, one does not simply make square hex like this meme. And the idea is that the problem is that you have these things called crosscuts. And so if you have these like mutually diagonal pattern of opposite colored stones, then this makes it into a draw fest. It's totally indecisive. Nobody will ever win a game like this, or a tie fester, I guess. And so
this is because the whites are not connected and the blacks are also not connected, right? That's the point. Like, nobody owns that middle thing, and
exactly.
So they're not connected.
Exactly.
You have to actually be kind of orthogonally touching your pieces to walk your way through.
Yeah. So if that's the thing, if you allow diagonal adjacencies, then it's just a race, and it's not fun.
You can't block them. Basically, you can't block them. Is what you're trying to say. It's too.
Yeah, there's no blocking.
It's too hard to block.
So then, I don't know. Basically, I created a game where if you create this crosscut pattern, if you make this, then you get to swap two of the stones to almost any way which you like. You just take the one that you put down, which created, say if you just put this one down, and then you can swap it with an adjacent enemy stone, either this way or that way, and then that ends your turn, unless it's still in a crosscut, and in which case you keep swapping until the stone that you placed is no longer in a crosscut. So it starts on an empty board. It ends up like this. There's no crosscuts in the end, because any crosscut that would exist gets immediately swapped. So that's the idea. And so unfortunately, a guy found a cooperative.
You were asking me about this, if I could find one. I didn't have time, but you found it. It sounds like you found one.
I found a cooperative cycle, and what I want to know is if there's a forced cycle, because in this cooperative cycle, I can't think of any situation where it would be beneficial to the players to continue the cycle. So can you
go slowly? Start from the beginning, and you have black, which is black's move. Is that right? One is who does the same player get to adjust the crosscut, or does it alternate in terms of who gets to fix the crosscut?
It's alternating.
It's an alternating thing. I see. In terms of which one you want to flip, I see.
I mean, in this cycle, black and white are both moving.
Right.
So like, here's the beginning of the cycle here, and then somebody moved, and then it's not well. I just copied this from BGG.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But it looks like the top right. So the top black sees a cycle. I'm looking and flips it up and down. So the third column with the 2 and the 1 right there flips that one, and then this is almost too fast to kind of do this. I need to kind of slow here. But you're saying it wouldn't behoove black to do it because white would then win or something, I think, right?
It wouldn't behoove. Yeah, white, like, basically
the moment white wins immediately once
white wins, but white already won in this position. It's a cooperative cycle. It's not a real life game or anything. So
right.
It's the idea is finding
it's a collusive cycle where both players are trying to make this thing that goes forever or something.
Right. And that annoys me greatly, because I want to make a game that will be deep, and forced cycles are poison to a deep abstract.
Sure.
So there's that, and then I was working on a game.
Can we talk about forced cycles for a second? It's interesting because we all in our world. I don't know if Can I draw? Let me just annotate really, really fast. We actually talk about visualizing. There's a way to annotate on top of an existing thing.
Right, on a game tree, you mean?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about the game tree. We think about, how do I say this? It's like kale, or it's like kelp growing up from the bottom of the ocean, okay? We think of the bottom of the ocean as known values. It's a primitive win. Game is over. Win, tie. We call it tie. The game is over, but equal power, like tic-tac-toe. And win, tie, lose. And then this kelp grow up from the bottom. And then what happens is, as you're working your way and pushing, trying to solve a game, we try to exhaustively solve these games, at some point the kelp can't get to the surface of the water, which means all the positions that are in the water above the kelp are draws. We call it a sea of draws.
Right.
So we think of game, and many games have that. Many games have draws in their game. You know, chess has draws in their game. But so you're saying a forced cycle says what? See, I don't think of the forced cycle. I say once it's a draw, best play is draw. Best play for me is draw. What do you mean? For my definition of the word draw is that if it's a draw, it's best play draw for both players, which means I guess it is a forced cycle.
That's what I mean too. I mean, find a draw.
You just find a draw. That's basically what you want to have.
I just want to draw. Yeah, because if for you, a draw is a infinite cycle where the best play is
forever. Right. So you're saying, are there any draws in your game when we play this game? That's exactly what.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, for the flip. Yeah, for the flip. Right.
Can you go back to the previous slide where you had the roll for resolve?
Yeah. So I simplified it a little bit, but these are the full rules, and they're still quite simple. So, yeah, I can read them too. So yeah, you have two players, black and white stones, grid. You take turns placing and swapping. And you win by connecting your side with a chain of connected stones. And this, I mean, orthogonally connected chain. Even during at any time. So if you're at any points connected, then you win, no matter what. No matter whose turn it is. And you place a stone on an empty point. You have the choice to either do one or two, and they're almost the same. So you place a stone on an empty point. If you get a crosscut, then swap it with different adjacent enemy stones that share the crosscut until that stone is no longer part of the crosscut. So that's like, you put a stone down. If it's in a crosscut, then you get it out of a crosscut by resolving. And then secondly, the other option
that's a forced move then, by the way. It's not like if. It's a forced if. It says whenever it happens, you gotta uncrosscut it, is what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not you may swap it, you have to swap it.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
And that's why sometimes swapping is actually bad for you, because there's lots of tactics now I've figured out that, like, you can set up a situation where the enemy doesn't even want to make the crosscut, even though it's usually good to make the crosscut. They don't want to, because then they'll put themselves in a disadvantageous situation, because there's a chain of swaps that result in you connecting, actually. And then the other one is that if there's already a crosscut on the board, which sometimes resolving creates its own crosscut. That's why this is here. So choose a stone of your color that's already in the crosscut, and then just resolve it. And then later,
you say resolve crosscuts. I mean, it might be multiple crosscuts. You might have to, because of the swap. Is it only ever one crosscut? I'm just thinking there might be multiple, and usually resolve the single crosscut that you have, or could it ever be the case that you get a double crosscut? You have to now resolve both, and what do you do for both?
I actually don't know if they'll ever will be. Well, but anyway,
I don't know.
There may be.
Are you forced to resolve crosscut if a crosscut exists at the end of the opponent's turn?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Are you forced to resolve a crosscut if a crosscut exists on the end of your opponent's turn?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's empty spaces, you can always just place a stone of your color on an empty point.
So you could ignore number 2. There's a crosscut, but I'll just leave it there for a moment.
Right, because eventually it will when the board fills up, it will become the only thing left to do.
Right. Yeah. Because you can't add any pieces anymore.
Right.
And the other nice thing about this is the same proof that Hex uses, which is you can. There are no. How do I say? There are no. There are no ways to do a crosscut where both players win and there's a tie. And the way that they argue it, this is a beautiful, what I've heard is, think of the left and right as water, and think of the top and bottom as land. Either this river flows from left to right or it doesn't. And so there's either a connection from left to right or there isn't. If there isn't, then land connects north to south to break the water flow, or there is water flow. So you can never have both of them. So even with the crosscuts, you can't ever flip it so that, like, for example, if you crosscut, I just crosscut and connect 4, you could make it so that there's 2 4 in a rows. That's not whatever happens here, because you're trying to connect the top, the north and south and east and west here.
Right. Yeah, that's why I'm not so hot on N in a row games.
Interesting.
But I mean, it's just personal preference.
Yeah. No, there are different categories. Under abstract strategy games and Wikipedia, they categorize them as blocking or N in a row and blah, blah, blah. And N in a row games, I also find them limited interestingness to me.
I think the main reason for me is that they're not scalable so much. Like, you can play Connect 6 or Connect 4 on like a huge grid, but it would never make a difference.
I mean, I played Gomuku. Gomuku, is there's a Chinese version, and Gomuku is a Japanese version. What's the Chinese version of Gomuku? It's a Wusuchi. Wusuchi is what it's called. Delightful game that I played a lot in grad school. And it's not Pente is the commercialized version, where if you trap a piece, you can capture these things if you capture 5 of them. So I think it's a way to make Wusuchi more interesting. And that's a commercial game. I mean, people play it and it's fun and but it's still, in its principle, it's an N in a row game, which is a little different. Yeah.
I love Pente though. I have, because I have a connection to it from childhood.
Oh yeah, me too. Right. I think that's true for a lot of it. By the way, Justin's one of our top mathematical minds on our team. So if anybody's going to find this forced crosscut loop, it's going to be Justin or a team working with him, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I should go into the next thing, because I feel like I've used up all my time. So,
well, I'd love to have you back. I don't know if you have the time. This will happen like 2 a.m. for you. What did we figure this out? Is this for late at night?
It's 1 a.m. for me now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I can send you guys this presentation. So